Thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more from me, I have a lot of classes on Udemy. You can find the links to a lot of those in the description. Alright, first time I tried making this video, the camera looked a little fuzzy. It kind of still does, but we're just going to roll with it. So, one of the things that rolled through my mind this morning was, and it's been rolling through my mind for a couple of days now, is how spirits communicate with us. And I might have touched on this topic in any of my many videos, but some things require repeating. So, spirits, whether we particularly call to them or not, or even if we do an invocation of a particular spirit or a sigil, or depending on who we're working with and whatever, they don't just show up in our ritual space and on our altar during times when we are in ritual. I mean, of course they can and they do, and I have plenty of experiences with that where you might feel a temperature change in the room, or you might have a sudden kind of noise or a smell, or you get little inclinations and thoughts that come bubbling up from your subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is the antenna through which we have spirits communicate through us, which is why meditation is very, very important. I always hype on that, to free up the space in our mind so we can get messages through, because they communicate through energies and whatnot, because they are beyond this physical four-dimensional length, width, height, and time realm. But when we are working with spirits, and especially when we're working with them for a long-term goal, or if we're building relationships with them by working with them consistently, whether you're working with something like, the Goetic spirits or the 50 names of Marduk, or if you are working with nature spirits through the lens of a Paco, particularly in the Andean shamanic path, that my lady teaches. Spirits communicate with us not just through those little moments that are kind of sequestered and you put them in a box. The different things that happen in ritual are the only ways that spirits communicate with me. Wrong. Um, think of it this way: angel, from the Greek word angelos, means messenger. So they give us messages. Now you can step into synchronicities with this kind of stuff. I remember one of the guys I'm connected with, D.H. Thorne, talked about one time when he was doing a ritual, and of course this doesn't always happen inside ritual, as I just said, but when he was doing an invocation, and he was doing some work, a train horn blew at the exact moment when he was looking for a message or something, and that's a synchronicity there. In magic, there are no coincidences, and you can kind of downplay this kind of stuff if you stay too much in your logical mind, too much in the panya, and you want to open yourself up to more than that. I am very much it has been hard for me to kind of lean away from that, because my background is in psychology and whatnot. But that's where the spiritual stuff comes in. When you start to really dive deep into these things and you're working on transforming yourself, or you're working towards a certain goal or something, and you get, maybe somebody that you talk to tells you something that's relevant to what you're working on spiritually or mundanely, or you are out and about and you happen to be thinking about, or maybe not even thinking about, something that you're spiritually working on or something that you're mundanely working towards, and a hawk happens to fly right in front of your car, or a train horn goes off, or any of those little things. The idea of a messenger, an angelos, is the idea that spirit, because they're of a different realm, which is why they don't have physical bodies like we do, and they can be anywhere at any time. I've talked a lot about the Christian concept of angels and how that kind of applies to it, because that is very, very broad, and the Christian mindset is in our collective unconscious, so it's a good lens to look at that stuff through. But of course, we don't want to be so narrow-minded that we're talking church doctrine only, right? The idea is that nature and the world sends us these little messages through synchronicities. You see like angel numbers, as they call it. 1111, 333, 444. Those kinds of things. I'm not saying pigeonhole yourself to what you see in books and whatnot, but figure out what the synchronicities and these different messages are for you. Of course, you want to discern them in a way that means you're not taking everything as gospel, let's say, but you want to be open to what you are trying to work towards, whether it's spiritual or mundane, and get the idea of that particular thing that happened. What does that mean, right? So this is where you can kind of step into the ideas of, you know, what certain birds symbolize when they land on your back porch, or they fly in front of your car, or even, you could step into a bunch of different things. Like my lady and I were talking this morning about when we were going to go to a place to connect with the land spirits and do some offerings and things like that, which we do quite frequently during the summer. So this is going to be a busy summer. There was one single cloud in the sky that happened to look like a feather. So that gave us an idea of what we were going to be working on that day. And you want to open yourself up to the idea that not just the different people that you talk to that might say a little nugget of truth that helps you along the way, or a bird flies by, or you hear a bird noise, or a train noise, or you happen to be sitting out in the woods. There's a funny story from 2 weeks back. My lady was sitting in the woods, and she was doing her spiritual work out there. And then, with a group of deer came within 20 feet of her, and that doesn't happen that often, you know. So then she had to get an idea of, oh, this particular thing that I'm doing right now. Then the deer shows up. Well, what do deer symbolize? So she looks it up. And, it's very synchronistic with what the kind of stuff that she was thinking about, the kind of stuff that she's working on, the kind of stuff that she's focusing on. And that's the idea. You take that little synchronicity and you put it through your filters of what could this mean? Not just what a book tells me. What could this mean for me? Because the universe, the all, the great mind, spirit, whatever you want to call it, it's constantly trying to send us messages. That's why if we have a problem, and, those life lessons that continue to happen over and over until we learn them, that's the universe putting a challenge on you. And it's trying to send you messages of, hey, you got to work on this stuff. Or you're out and about and you happen to, depending on what you're working on, you might, get your attention might be focused towards something symbolic on a tree. What does that mean for you in that moment? What are you working on? And then, or, you could have something with like a bird or a wild animal, or even, a shooting star, stuff like that. Interpret those events with discernment through the lens of what are you working on right now, mundanely and spiritually, and then make a logical decision about if this could mean good luck or bad luck, or yes or no, and weigh the pros and cons of your decisions, and then make an educated decision. It's rough going if you are only living in the mundane world and you don't take any messages from, and you don't take any input from spirit, be it your subconscious mind or different synchronicities. And then it's also a rough world if you are too much in the spiritual and you go with everything based on synchronicities and spirit and, oh, hey, that's pointing me in this direction. There's no discernment between the two. There has to be a balance between what's termed in Indian mysticism as panya, which is the right side and more logical, and yoke, which is the left side and it's more mystical, right? You got to balance these two things. It's the two pillars. Can't talk more about that. So synchronicities and getting messages from spirit are ways in which it's like looking at a painting. Everybody's going to interpret certain things in a painting a different way, or a song might mean something different to you than it means to somebody else. There's like tons of Zelda music that I listen to nonstop throughout the house, and there's certain songs that are like intense, and they hold a very, very deep meaning for me because I've played all the games and I know what it's about. But because my lady doesn't have that context, when she hears that kind of music, then it might feel like too intense and overwhelming. Even music on the radio, for to take a segue, can be a synchronistic thing of what you're thinking about and what it can communicate to you in that moment about the path and the different things that you're working on. But anyway, when it comes to context and whatnot, you got to interpret it as far as what you're working on right now and discern it as, is this trying to push me in a certain direction? Is that a good direction to go in? And if you get repetitive stuff that's leaning you towards that one direction, maybe they're really trying to push you because you're blocking yourself from that kind of thing. So, given that angelos, angels, messengers, they don't have physical bodies, although they can show up in physical bodies in some biblical stories or whatever, which lends to the idea that you can physically see some things that happen in a ritual space or even out and about if you're spiritually attuned enough. But given that they don't have physical bodies and they are representative of different things, given, you can extrapolate the hell out of this stuff, where an angel was created for every particular thing. There's one for grass, there's one for trees, there's one for water, there's one for rocks, right? Each angel is a different species. Well, that lends to the idea that every single thing out there, from a rock to a blade of grass to a leaf falling down to a bird to the deer to any of those things, can be a what? Angelos. They could be a messenger. And then it's up to you to interpret what that message is and what you are supposed to do with it. So you have to be a balanced filter when it comes to these synchronicity things of numbers, things on the radio, animals, different things like clouds, northern lights, shooting stars, all of that stuff. You have to interpret these things and be open to them rather than, oh, hey, that's just a squirrel. Let me give you an example. Every single time last year when we were out doing spiritual work at different lakes, waterfalls, mountains, you name it, somewhere along the way, a chipmunk showed up. You're like, oh, hey, you're out in nature. There's a frickin' chipmunk, right? And maybe, you could also just say because your attention was drawn to it, and then you're seeing it now. It's like blue car syndrome, right? If you know what I mean. Let me know in the comments if you know what I mean. But you could say that's just coincidence, whatever. In Magick, if you start to lean towards the idea that there is no coincidence and everything can inform you on what you're doing based on your interpretation and stuff like that, then I guarantee you can start opening yourself up to messages from different spirits and stuff. People step into magic all the time because they want to invoke something and have it appear in their room, right? But that's high level stuff that I've only gotten to a couple of times, and I've been at this for like 18 years, right? Does that happen? Yes. Does it happen all the time? No. You want to open yourself up to the fact that spirit talks to you through many, 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 many different ways. And leaning on like Christian perspective a little bit, the idea is, with them at least, and in some sects and not others, to develop a personal relationship with God where God can talk to you and give you messages and things like that. And people have said, like, I've heard God and, Jesus talked to me and stuff like that. Why are the only ones that happens to? Because they're dedicated towards that personal relationship. So the idea is we build a personal relationship with the universe around us and we open ourselves up to those messages. And the more that we kind of acknowledge them, we don't always have to trust them, and we don't always have to say yes, and we don't always have to say no. But the more that you open yourself up to that, then the more that they're going to talk to you, and the more you can discern and interpret what they're saying and take it as guidance or distraction, and even just maybe even a warning about something or whatever. And the more that you open yourself up to this stuff, I guarantee you your spiritual life, both inside and outside of ritual, is going to grow much bigger. Because one of the biggest things I'm going to continue to harp on with this channel is magic is not just what you do at your altar, which I keep pointing over there because my altar's over there. It's about you building a relationship with spirits and the energies that are around you, and then working with those different spirits and those different energies, and being able to function in a way where you are walking both the physical world and the spiritual world. If you interpret magic as just a tool, that's all it's going to be, and it's not going to be very, very high level for you. I know how to take a hammer and put a nail in the wall, right? Other people they go to school and they train and stuff, and they can take that hammer and nail and other tools and they can build a freaking house with it, right? Because they make that their lifestyle. So magic and spirituality, arguably, at its most advanced level, or its most accessible level, also, um, is a lifestyle that the more that you start to see everything as magical and spiritual around you all the time, you are going to have much, 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 much better results than if you just stick to your altar stuff. You know, um, years ago when, I started working with the 50 Names of Marduk out of the Necronomicon spellbook, that's great. That's hammer meets nail, though. But the more that you work with those things, the more that, like, the amount of times I worked with Mala, who's about courage, or Barashakushu, who's about miracles and kindness, or Ziku, who's about, like, finding treasure and opportunities and different things like that. The deeper a relationship that I built with them, and then I didn't even have to work with the 7 steps anymore. I could just trace the sigil in the air using my handy sigil magic method, which is a book, patented by me. The better my magic got. So don't think of magic as just a tool. You want to use a tool, you grab your tool bag, you go fix something. Magic is a lifestyle. You build relationship with friends. You don't just go over to a friend's house because they serve you in some way. If you do, that's selfish stuff. But, you know, you build a relationship with that friend, and then there's an exchange, a positive exchange on both sides. Eine. And then that enriches your life and theirs. And working with spirits is the same way. And spirits are around us. They want to build a relationship with us. They want to connect with us. And so that's why they're sending us messages and other things like that. And if you are into spiritual stuff, which is probably why you're here, then you want to connect with that world too. And hopefully not just for personal gain, right? Personal growth is way better than personal gain. Because with personal growth comes personal gain, but just to do personal gain is selfish and is backwards, and don't do it. Anyways, I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but let me know what you guys think about this one. Drop any of the good stuff in the comments. If you want to learn from me one-on-one, or you want to engage in deeper stuff, I have my Udemy classes and my Patreon and all that good stuff. It's in a link tree down in the description. I will see you next time. Good hunting.